of the sound check. Hey there, friends. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are doing another discussion, foundations, and tonight we're going to be talking about marriage. So we are really grateful that you are tuning in with us right now. Again, my name is Ben.
I'm Betsy.
And I'm Brent.
Yeah, and for the next hour, we're going to have a discussion, and we are live, meaning you can interact with us, and we want to answer questions. We want to engage with you. Betsy, tell us how we do that.
So yeah, there's a couple different ways you can engage in the chat. And so if you're on the chat, you can just type in your question there. And you can also, if you have my phone number or Ben's phone number, you can text either one of us. We both have our phones here. So if you have that, or you can text our texted church number, which is 805, and it should be coming up on the screen, 413-4675. So you can text that number as well, and that'll be anonymous. You won't know who that's from. So, so those are the ways to engage with us. So keep your questions coming during the time, and as we have time, I'll interject those questions in.
Fantastic. Today we have Brent Estes with us. He's a licensed marriage family therapist. Tell us a little about yourself, Brent. You were here last week, which was awesome. We did parenting. You can find those resources on our website, but Brent's back with us this week talking marriage.
Yes, so I'm, like you said, I'm a licensed clinician here on the Central Coast. Have been here going on 25 years. Married, happily married 21 years to my lovely wife, Carrie, and I have 2 kids. I have one that's in college and one that is in high school right now, and we're all kind of living at home right now.
Yeah.
So, but that's my gang.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been married 18 years. We got 3 kids, and yeah.
And I've been married 28 years, and we have 3 kids as well. So.
Yeah. I'm happily married. We're all happily married.
Happily married.
Yeah, we're all happily married. But marriage is challenging.
Yes.
And we know that especially during this time, during this season, we know that marriages are stressed more than ever because people have had to make changes. People are stuck at home. They're living in close quarters. We're talking about this even though divorce rates are way down because people aren't making these massive changes and court systems are down. We know that there are serious issues and significant issues that people are facing right now. And so tonight, our hope is that we would have a meaningful discussion. You'd be able to join in and jump in. And hopefully this stays on our website for a while too, where this would just be a good resource for you. Mm-hmm. So jump right into it. Brent, what is it that we're seeing? What are you seeing that's specific to this time that is extra difficult for people to navigate in marriages?
Wow. Piggybacking on what you're saying and don't want to say ditto to what you were saying earlier, but I think most of us are seeing, or I'm experiencing in my office, people are very overwhelmed right now. People are tired. People are weary. It's like there's a big heavy weighted blanket, and it's not therapeutically a heavy therapeutic blanket. It's just an overwhelming sense of heaviness for couples, trying to manage, trying to make sense of all of this. Either we're all kind of nestled in together or we are more socially isolated. We're encouraging people to socially distance themselves, but in marriages right now, sometimes that's not healthy, but sometimes it is healthy, and sometimes we're all snuggled right next to each other and we need our space.
Right.
So as the chest and the lungs come in and go out, it's hard to get out of that cadence right now. We're just like sometimes suffocated.
Right.
Or we are just completely repelled from each other, and that's not healthy either.
Right.
So it's hard to create that healthy cadence right now.
Right.
But we have the stressors of finances, we have the stressors of our kids, we have the stressors of what's going on at work, or we're all working in the same space, a lot of us.
Right.
And so we're bumping into each other. And this really wasn't what we maybe signed up for when we thought that this was the way marriage was going to be, or our families are going to be. It's like, whoa, it's you again.
Right. Right.
So it is unique.
It is unique. I think it was unique for this culture too. And you've talked about this in conversation before, that this is an island culture.
Yeah.
Which I want you to explain your thought on that. But
Okay.
we have a lot of people that are transplants here from somewhere else,
Right.
and maybe they don't have big safety network or community, or they've retired from somewhere else, and now they're stuck at home quite a bit more
Right.
in this island culture.
Yeah.
But talk to me about that. I think that was really interesting. We were talking offline about that.
In a lot of ways, this Central Coast is like a big island. Although we're on one big continent, we're on one big landmass here, but the Central Coast is pretty isolated in a lot of ways. And what feeds it is the metropolitan areas, 3 or 4 hours away. Right. But it is unique because there are a lot of us that are born and raised here on the Central Coast. And then there's a good amount that come in and go out. So there's a definite flow of people that come in and come out. But that can be a challenge sometimes, trying to figure out inroads to try to meet people that are kind of in the know or know others that are here. And I don't think our churches are any exception to that. I think sometimes, although we want to be making connections and trying to connect with new people, and I think that's a great resource, sometimes we can sometimes unfortunately be isolated.
Right.
And kind of reflect that of the Central Coast culture.
Right.
And so I think we have to be careful. Yeah. But it is an island. We kind of have done things traditionally our own ways here. There are some uniquenesses to our culture.
Right. Right.
Here on the Central Coast.
Yeah, the insider-outsider culture
Right.
is pretty strong here.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to break in. And I think that I've seen personally a lot of folks that come here from somewhere else, and it's just hard on their marriage because all of a sudden they don't have their friendships, the networks that they had
Right.
from the Bay Area or from LA.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're confronted with, yeah, it's beautiful every day here, but
Yeah.
how many days can you walk on the beach, collect seashells
Yeah.
with this one other person?
Right. And trying to do that right now in the midst of a pandemic where we're supposed to be extra careful not to bump into each other.
Right.
So how do we do that? And I think I think you guys are thinking about creating more connections with couples or parents or other sort of helpful communities, I think is so key right now. But I think it is being more purposeful to try to find other couples.
Right.
And if it's someone that's our same age and having peers, but sometimes it's even nicer sometimes to seek out people that are a stage ahead of us and see how they're doing it.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
Very good. When we talk about marriage, there are certain categories that always come up as issues to navigate, whether it's premarital or older, as you have been established a long time. But, finances, sexual expectations, family of origin stuff, hobbies. I mean, are there any other issues that you deal with a lot, in your practice?
Well, I think if I'm understanding the question is just like, what are we looking for? What do I see that's coming my way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I think things that I want to see or want to be encouraged by, and so many couples right now, I think the beauty is we have a lot of time to work on our stuff or kind of look at ourselves.
Right.
Although sometimes it is a challenge, but just like, hey, we're here, we're
Right.
making it work, we're not going anywhere. But some of those markers are the ability to kind of resolve or repair conflict.
Okay.
Ephesians 4:26 talks about not letting the sun go down in our anger.
Right.
And I think the idea of God honors our ability just to check in or plug into each other and try to ultimately repair. There's some amazing studies that are coming out of the University of Washington that looks at, I say Washington, but it's Washington. But look at couples. They do these love labs, which sounds kind of odd and weird, but on the weekends, for 20 some odd years, they've been bringing these couples in and observe them by cameras, and they watch them. And so many of the couples, they try to create predictability of how couples are going to work through it, or are their marriages going to make it? And what they found is that the couples that continue to work on these repair attempts, they don't have to resolve it, but looking at restoration. And I think that's what God wants for us, is to create restoration on so many different levels. But it's those individuals that are really kind of working on trying to hey, repair. I blew it. I said something I shouldn't have said. Or can I check in with you? I said it this way, but this hurt. when I heard it this way. So every day being purposeful and trying to make it a repair attempt. And they're observing that, and they're noticing over the years the couples that are able to actually connect and try to repair and restore, their marriages are making it.
That's great. So are these couples that have gone through like trauma, or are they just regular couples?
All the above.
Okay.
So they're doing a sampling of
Okay.
all above.
So when you say repair, you're saying couples that essentially are doing what?
Oh, so there has been a conflict.
Okay.
They've observed it, they're tallying it, they're tagging it,
Okay.
and then in
Okay.
the process of the day, they're like, over the 20, 25 years that they've been doing these studies, they're like, look, the ones that are continue to try to make attempts or are repairing or looking at an angry moment, those relationships are lasting compared to those that don't ignore, or they just kind of go on with their isolation or doing their own thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that couples that know and engage a conflict of some sort, could be
Right.
the dishes, who does the dishes, could be something really
Right.
much more dramatic.
Right.
But those people that don't ignore but engage
Yeah.
are successful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you do if you have a spouse that doesn't want to engage?
That's a good question. I think every day, and the study also looks at, we make bids for our spouse's attention. So like back in the olden days when, there's an example where they would show like, hey, did you see this cartoon?
Right.
And we're bidding our spouse, or did you see this headline in the article, or did you see this? We're bidding for interaction, we're bidding for connection.
Oh, that's
And,
interesting.
and after a while, the challenge is when that other partner starts to, or doesn't receive, or the other partner does not make that connection, that relationship starts to shut down.
Interesting.
It's like a sea urchin or a sea anemone shutting down at the ocean. It's kind of like, and so the receptor just starts to fade.
Right.
And so it's really quite sad. So I think the idea is to purposely look at that
Right.
and make those connections.
That's really good.
I'm going to jump in here.
Please.
'Cause we had a question that kind of relates to that. It says, how do you know when to stop trying since you're the only one working on the marriage? Or do you wait until the other person is ready to try and fix it? Their spouse keeps saying, not sure whether they want to climb the big mountain to fix it. So, how do you navigate that? I mean, that's kind of also like the counseling. Like, I'm
Yeah.
ready to go do counseling. My spouse isn't. How do we navigate that?
Wow, there's a lot in
I know
that.
there's a lot in there. I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Betsy. I think that the first one is, if at all possible, to go to your spouse or your partner and ask him that question. I think the best person to go to is like, let me ask you this question. That was so articulated. That question was so well articulated. I think the other thought would be, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to look at. I want to work on our marriage, but I'm going to go, made this appointment. You're more than welcome to join me. And at least, and sometimes it's like, can I get you in for at least once? Let's just go.
Yeah.
And I'm committed to make this marriage work. I'm committed to move forward. I think part of the challenge, probably the most challenging couples that I work with, are the ones that are already talking about ending the relationship. And it's like, oh, we're going to go try therapy now. It's like, no, that's not the best time. So I like the fact that, yeah, it's worth probably climbing that mountain and having your partner climb it with you.
Great. Thank you. It's good.
Yeah, it's rare that two partners are in the exact same spot.
Yeah.
Almost anywhere in any
Right.
time, right?
Right.
But that happens a lot too, like in church. One spouse wants the family to grow their faith and to have, make Sundays a priority, and the other spouse isn't as engaged with that. And it happens in all categories. But how do you deal with a spouse? 'Cause here's the question: spouse comes into your office and the other spouse is not there. How do you go about navigating that relationship? And what do you talk to them about?
Deal with what I have in my space with them. I will look at ways to better communicate. We'll look at ways to kind of help engage their spouse. Looking at the church question, or looking at the parenting question with that is like sometimes one parent is more active than the other.
Right.
It is a dance.
Right. And
I think if we can create this idea of the spouse that I'm seeing going home and talking, not nagging. Nagging is never good. Never shaming is never good, because you're never going to get them with those. But just like, hey, this is something I learned. or this is something that I want to help us apply, saying these are some tools. And it is a dance, like maybe even using that. Like there are times I'm going to need you to lead.
Right.
And there's other times that I'm going to follow, or other times where I want you to realize that I need to tap out because I need you to step in here.
Right.
So I think it is a fine dance.
Yeah. Especially, I could speak as someone that has children, right? So if you have a long day of work,
Right.
you got busy lives, your kids want your attention. How do you create that space? I know you go on dates or things like that, but are there other things we can be doing instead of waiting a month to go on a date or have
good
the time
question.
to talk?
Well, I kind of break it down to three things, and I can't help but think of CIF, and in this area, you think of football or you think of high school sports, but C would be curious, like purposely being curious about your partner.
Okay.
I had these kids on my street that we have this, I don't know what, it's a box, an irrigation box, and the kids found this toad in there. And for this one summer, the neighborhood kids would just be fully on their bellies looking in this box every day, just totally muddied up and looking for this toad. They named it and then they would put other frogs in there. But every day they would open that and be so curious as to what's going on in that box. And I think it's our family, our spouse deserves that same attention with the idea of being so curious, taking a few minutes, having that FaceTime, having that curiosity of making connection, purposeful check in and check up, like how are you doing, what's going on. And it is tiresome. We come home pretty weary, but knowing that our partner also wants to share, and sometimes already having a prepared, like, oh, my spouse is going to love this. The other day, real life story, I got locked in the gym. I went to go work out. It was Super Bowl Sunday, and they locked the gym down on me. And so I had to figure out how I was going to scale 2 fences to get out of the gym. But it was the idea of like, I immediately thought of my spouse going, they're going to love this story and they're not going to believe it. And I had to I had to scale this. Nobody else was around. I was looking for cameras. But the idea of like, the folks at home are going to love this story. But already preparing, not necessarily to make them laugh, but just like, this is where I'm at. This is what I just went through. And just that deep understanding and interest in our spouse. So that's the C, that just checking in. Everyone has a story to tell. I think we've unfortunately lost the art of storytelling.
So C is stay curious.
Stay curious and the check-in. And then the I would be more of an intentional investment, being intentional. Like Valentine's Day is coming up. Being, every year we look at Valentine's being, this year it looks a little different. But every year we are trying to be more intentional, bringing the flowers, bringing the candy, whatever. But I think we could build that into kind of a weekly opportunity, a monthly opportunity, and then a yearly definitely getaway as a couple, if not before, and getting away and evacuating together. This year that looks a little different.
What were those 3 time periods again?
I would say ideally weekly. Going like on a weekly date, but if you can, every other week. Monthly for sure, and then yearly evacuate. Yearly, just get out of town.
A night or two away.
A night or two away. If some people do it more, but ideally just evacuating, getting away. And I know it's a little bit unique right now, but we have a lot of opportunity to make up for that lost time. There's this idea of emotional kind of bank accounts where if we're not investing in that right now with our spouse or partner, we will be bankrupt by the end. If we're not being intentional in doing that purposefully now, when our kids launch or when our kids get out of the house, we're trying to reintroduce ourselves to our partner. It's like, who are you? I don't know you anymore, but we have to be very intentional and purposeful to make those deposits in the account. And then the F would be faith. Just really looking at our faith in Christ, looking at our faith that passes all understanding. Sometimes this should not work. These relationships are complicated. These relationships are difficult. But to lean in on that faith as a couple, often praying together. And the other idea is looking at being faithful to our vows. What is most important there? So kind of F would be faith.
That's good.
So CIF?
That's great.
Okay.
I've noticed with faith, I actually had a counseling professor tell us, a bunch of seminarians, they said, one thing you should not do as pastors and seminaries, like, don't have a devotional with your spouse. Like, it was jarring, but the idea is like, you're the expert, or supposedly. So actually pulling back and just seeing your spouse as like another person. They're not one of your parishioners. They're not someone you preach to or need to. But there's something about faith in there of just, you know, for Katie and I found the best thing with her and I just, how are you doing with the Lord? You know, not even like language like that, but like just simply like, you know, what are you learning? What's God teaching you? And it's like she has her own faith, I have my own faith, but together we have a faith.
A growing faith.
A growing faith. But it's different than maybe the faith that I grew up in where, you know, dad's always doing a devotional, mom's listening, and, you know, kind of, I don't know. It's different for everybody.
It's different for everybody. I think these days now more than ever, since there is so much going on, we're bombarded with, sometimes it's looking at faith and culture, that intersection of faith and culture.
There you go.
And having those discussions are so interesting. And then out of that, maybe praying for an aspect of that or something like that, and just how we are with that.
That's really good.
I think that example is so important for those of us that have families, for our kids to see that. I think part of the challenge is our kids aren't necessarily at times seeing adulthood look very good. And I think we have to be ever so careful as just to make sure we hone in on that. So many of our kids are heavy, they don't want to grow up because it doesn't look good. But if we can have a sense of humor, if we could laugh, if we can have those connections, I think we're going to be making adulthood look a little bit better.
That is good. It's very good.
I want to piggyback a little bit on that because you talked about your kids watching. And what if you have a marriage where you didn't have any parental Christian influence? So you weren't raised in Christian homes. And now you're trying to have a God-centered marriage. Like, what are some tips or tricks for how do you navigate that? And
there's so much there. I would say the question is so right. Just wanting to do what is right, and I think it's okay to be not okay at times. I think that's a good example of like, hey, we're going to make mistakes. And also leaning in on others, maybe in the church that are maybe older. I love hanging out with older couples, just like, especially the ones that have been married 40, 50, 60 years, and asking the questions, what makes it work? And they have some hilarious statements. And just what is in it, but also just hanging out with them. And I think the key is if you didn't get it in your relationship, then you find kind of a Christian mama and a papa, not replacing them, not dishonoring our parents, but also just like how did you guys make it work, and letting them know that, like, hey, we're looking for someone, we're looking for a mentor couple or couple mentor couples.
That's great. Good.
It's really good.
Yeah,
it goes back to your CIF. Curious, intentional, and faith. Like all those would be starting points. I mean, there's not an age limit on those. So the couples that you've talked to or counseled that have been in for a while, I mean, been married for a long time. I mean, how do you continue to keep the curiosity going? Especially if you have kids, because sometimes your conversation is kids. Or even if they're gone, it's still centered on kids or work. And how do you stay curious with your spouse?
Yeah, it's hard because there are moments where, to your point, we're not totally going to be on par. We're exhausted, we're tired, but finding those moments to be that much more curious, or finding those moments, sometimes it's on my drive home, like, tell me what's up, what's happening. Or it's those moments of just texting during the day, during my lunch break. Like, what's the latest? What's happening? News, sports, and weather, what's going on? So leaning on that, sometimes it's not best to do it right when we get home. Or purposely after the kids go to bed, because sometimes that's a nightmare. And we're exhausted. And we're falling asleep in our kids' bed before they do.
I like what you said, too, about sort of the reciprocating, in a sense, like, you know, if your spouse is trying to get your attention. That's a really interesting concept. Because a lot of times it'll be, you know, shoot each other funny memes or text or things like that, and you're flirting, you're having fun, you're just staying engaged, you're having fun. But what are some other ways, maybe practically, that we can people can keep engaging and pursuing the other spouse that you've seen meaningful?
I like the shooting the memes, the little check-ins. We have technology. We want to use it in the right way. I think, unfortunately, sometimes we isolate and get ourselves sometimes as individuals in trouble, where we get into our own social world. But engaging with your partner through technology, since we have it, having fun, or this is what I'm looking at right now, and you take a picture of it, a screenshot it if you and your partner aren't together, and it could be just the dog sitting on the ground, or it's the kid falling asleep in their homework, or it could be just going and making a memory. Just like, hey, I just want to go for a walk with you right now. Or, you know, I look forward to a hike this weekend. So the kind of like purposely having a vision for the next thing that you're going to do together. Or you know, maybe it was a funny, back to the idea of humor, where some of the funnest times is when I will, sometimes sitting in church where I'm looking at my partner and we'll just start cracking up. And it's probably the worst time to start cracking up. But it's just that connection, like, I know what you're thinking, you know what I'm thinking, and there's something that just reminded me of something. And I think it's that, always trying to find some humor.
That is good. Got to laugh together. What some other hot topics? How about like sex and sexuality with technology? You know, it's just the reality. You know, not just men but women too. Pornography is rampant. I mean, you can get it anonymously anytime, anywhere. Have you navigated porn and porn addiction, and porn usage with couples? Have you done much of that?
Oh, I do have couples that come in and they will discuss about that. They'll look at it. They'll have challenges with that, or they will have found their partner looking into that. And it is so isolating. It is so shaming often, or it is uniquely enough, I think, in our culture outside the church, it has become normalized. So that's another big challenge. But unfortunately, with that, there are unfortunate expectations. There are unfortunate. It creates its own standard that is just so wrong. It's trying to shut that down, or trying to create a whole nother perimeter around that to look at what was ideally set up.
Well, can you explain that a little further?
So the idea of sex, it was intended for pleasure. It was intended to be shared within the relationship, in the context of the relationship, and outside with these other unfortunate infiltration of ideas or other things that are other scripts that are coming in, other people's scripts or other people's ideas. That's not real helpful for some of these relationships.
No,
for all of our relationships.
Well, and Ben, the other day when we were in your office talking about this conversation, you said something that I thought was pretty helpful about, I don't know if it was a seminary or where you heard it, but about couples and their sexual relationship in marriage, in the context of marriage. Oh
yeah, it was Dr. Mark Laberton, if you know. He did Healing the Wounds of Sexual Addiction. I took a course with him, and he basically bottom lined it, said, in the context of marriage, like, do whatever you want as long as it's mutually respectful. You guys enjoy each other, and you don't bring other people into it, including pornography. So whether it's, you know, it's pretty standard. It was pretty standard to hear people today, you know, like, let's add another person into the bedroom, or let's watch porn together. And it just, Christians, non-Christians, it seems like that's almost like a thought that, like, oh, this will spice things up. It seems like it's just always disastrous.
Oh, horrible.
I mean, we know it is as believers, but I mean, if people are watching that aren't, and they think that this will be good for us, it just seems like it's never helpful.
No, because then it creates a whole nother layer of self-concept, self-worth, that I'm never going to be like this, or there's all kinds of other stuff that we bring into our relationships to begin with. And so we have all these unfortunate insecurities and shame and that other stuff, and it just brings all that up in the wrong context.
Yeah. So if someone did come to you and they were stuck in this pattern, where one spouse is addicted to this, I mean, how would you navigate that process with them?
Is it just the one person I'm seeing, or am I seeing
So
both?
you're seeing both, but
Okay.
sometimes they often happen. One spouse doesn't want to talk about
Right.
this habit or this addiction. The other person is feeling insecure about it. How do you counsel that couple?
The idea there is to try to, like what you were saying, trying to create a common space,
Okay.
trying to look at what is okay in the context of marriage,
Right.
but also setting some boundaries, setting some perimeters, setting ideal expectations
Right.
that are going to work for both of them,
Right.
and be realistic, but
Right.
also trying to help, even if that individual needs a little extra help, with helping him be a little bit more accountable for some of those things. Not to shame him, not to shut him down, not to drive him in a hole further, but just to have more openness and discussion,
Right.
and not having these unfortunate fantasies or ideas in his mind that he creates as truth.
Right. Right. Good.
Okay.
So you're saying create a space where the couple can acknowledge
Yeah.
the issue, and then maybe if it's the male, you try to work explicitly with him on this issue so that you might find some freedom, but you're probably navigating the wife too.
Absolutely.
Obviously to
Yeah.
deal with her own.
Yeah, and there's anger in there. There's a sense of betrayal. I mean,
Right.
going through loss, grief.
Right.
And for some of them, I mean, it makes sense. It's like an affair.
Right.
So kind of working through that, as I would handle how I sometimes handle individuals that have unfortunately had affairs. It's
Right.
just looking at restoration, back to
Right.
kind of the idea of repair and restoration,
Right.
and just building through new growth
Right.
and starting to catch that new growth in the relationship in a healthy sort of way.
Right. And going back to the restoration process,
Yeah.
right? So if you're the little restoration process is throughout the day, right? We got in a fight. It's not about the dishes. We fight about the dishes, but it's never about the dishes, right?
Right.
So you're fighting about roles or who's doing more or who's tired and unmet expectations. And if you repair those regularly, it's less likely that you're going to find yourself over here with massive repairs that have been neglected.
Yeah. And over there is the island. It's not the Central Coast Island, but it's an island where sometimes we're all isolated on our own island and we're so far away that we don't want to get on our boat or swim to the other island where our partner is, because we're just so isolated. So it's trying to purposely still stay on our same island. Different analogy, different island here, but it's just trying to be making it work and trying to not get away from our partner.
But this person that's over here on the island,
Right.
what is step one?
Well, I don't want them to go on the island, but what's
I mean,
Yeah.
but the reality is we get here sometimes,
Right. What step one is to try to open communication,
Okay.
trying to make that connection again.
Yeah.
And I know some couples like, I'll swim my half, they swim their half. No, sometimes it means just swimming all the way to the island and showing up. Like, hello.
Right.
Or vice versa, like, I need to repair this. I need to make connections. So someone sometimes has to do a lot of swimming to try to make that connection. Like, hello, remember me,
Yeah.
and reconnect.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about empathy in our conversations. Like, you're a very empathetic person. I love your terminologies again. What was the terminology you used for? It wasn't just active listening, but it was emotional engagement.
Emotional connection.
Emotional
yeah,
connection.
emotionally connecting. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you talk to us about that? Because I know that a lot of times, as couples, we're on our own phones or watching TV, or we'd be in the same room, but we're not connected.
Right.
You could even be no kids around, but there's no emotional connection. You're in the room. Teach us how to be emotionally connected people.
Goodness. I think a lot of that comes from a place of support. A lot of it comes from hearing our story. We were talking earlier about wanting to protect our spouses. Like sometimes if our spouse had been in a unique spot during the day and we are so wanting to hear their story. A lot of us guys want, and it's kind of how we're hardwired, we want to go fix it for our spouse. But the idea of like trying to understand or reflect back the emotion. Right. Just the idea of trying to listen, like, okay, So it sounds like you were pretty upset, or you were crying after you spoke to this person. Us guys want to go beat that person up,
Right.
but just the idea of sitting with it.
Yeah.
You had mentioned a great
Yeah,
spot
you were-
earlier about how you work that through.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I'll come home and if I've been frustrated or I'm upset about something and I'll want to tell my husband, I have to preface it with, I don't want you to fix this for me. I just want you to listen. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for him because he's a fixer. He wants to fix it. He does want to go beat up the person who made me upset or whatever. And so, just trying to have him just listen and empathize and tell me you understand why I'm upset. It's helpful. It's helpful for me.
Yeah.
And what does that look like for you, though? I mean, how? You're standing in the kitchen and you start talking.
Yeah.
I mean, how long does your husband need to listen?
listen?
Yeah.
I think he needs to. For me, I would say he's going to listen to my story.
Right.
So maybe it's a 5-minute story,
Right.
and he's going to kind of reflect back and say, "Yeah, I understand why that was upset." And sometimes he'll say, like, "Can I give you some advice?" Or maybe not fix it, but can I give you some advice? Or can I, let me just reflect this back, and maybe this is something that would help or whatever. So he'll, try to get in there and help. Because that's what he wants to do. But there's times where I'm like, I just need you to listen. I just need you to understand what I'm feeling.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Can I give you some advice?
Yeah.
Or would you like some
Yeah.
advice?
Would you like some advice? Would you like my opinion? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You're really empathetic and you listen well. And, when you're in your office and you're listening, I've sat there with you, and when you're talking, you're listening, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
It's so, I think it's so important, especially as couples. I think I know where you're going with this, is the idea of, for me, I need to stay so present because I can quickly go to what my response is going to be, and that is not anywhere close to where they're going.
Right.
I think so often when we think we're listening, we're really kind of creating a comeback or trying to create something to say. And it's just being present and trying to hold that moment in a supportive, trying to understand what their world is like in that moment. Because I so often can get off in my own thought and then I'm gone and I'm not really present. And that's a hard thing sometimes. Especially if we're tired or we're worn out or we're thinking about an unfortunate event or a noise that's going on in the other room.
What's really difficult, I'm thinking of my own kids, if they're telling me a story, right? You come home from work and kids come up and they tell you, I got a juice box today and, I made the team or whatever. Try to listen, engage, and there comes a point where personally, I feel like I'm hitting a wall. I'm like, this story is going on and on.
They're going on and on and on.
Yeah,
there's no
there has to be like an emotional,
Yeah.
like cachet that you have, like a bank where you're just like, I don't got a ton more.
In that moment, sometimes I will, in this field we call it perseverating. Sometimes our kids or
Perseverating.
some individuals just go on and on and on. The train has left the station and they're not planning on stopping that train anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it's not going to stop on a dime.
Right.
So you want to give them permission to say, hey, I really want to hear what you say. Can you tell me one more sentence?
Right.
One or two more sentences, and then I'm going to have to shift the subject,
Right.
or I'm going to need to go and talk to mom,
Right.
or see what else is going on with your sister. So the idea of giving them permission, and they're like, but, and like, okay, we'll have to get to that later.
Right.
So it's setting that already the next station where that stop is
Right.
going to be.
I like that analogy. The train has left the building.
Yeah,
Might be going cross country for all
yeah,
you know.
yeah. You're like, we're all aboard, but like we want.
We need to dock
Yeah.
in Kettleman City.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go to New York.
Yeah,
Right.
so like let's like,
good.
I'm going to give you one or two more sentences because I really think what you're saying is important.
Right.
But I need you to and it also with our kids, we're kind of talking parenting here, but it helps them conceptualize their sentence structure and where
Yeah.
they're going with it. And let me wrap it up.
It's good. Being kind about it. sounds like,
Absolutely.
right? Which
Yeah.
is not easy.
No.
Yeah, so being kind about it. Then with your spouse, if you want to give them your best, like listening ear and really stay engaged.
Right.
Do you have any tips?
I think it is sometimes it's kind of rephrasing what I think I hear you saying. I mean, that is industry standard, but it's like the best practice is let me reflect the feeling. Let me reflect what I think is going on. It's not shutting them down for the next moment or two of what we did with our kids, but just like, hey, let me see if I understand what you're saying here. It went this way and then it went this way.
Right.
So it's rephrasing it or trying to make sure that we're understanding the feeling in the moment.
Right. Or rephrasing is good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And letting them know that we have their back.
Yeah.
I think that is so key. As we were talking earlier as to markers that I look for.
But here's a question though. So what happens, I mean, this probably happens. You want to have your spouse's back, but what if you think your spouse is wrong about something? And they just need you to listen to them, but if they're like, maybe this one's on you. Like, how do you?
You could probably say that.
Oh, yeah. Could. I'm sure he could.
I think you want to really understand their premise. Kind of what you were saying earlier is that you want to also try to reconnect. Like I might hear it differently, or I might try this way. Like you said, your husband sometimes says, like, can I offer a little advice here? It's coming in from a low flight pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just like, hey, not with a machine gun, but just like, hey, I'm coming in. Like, can I offer some advice, or do you want to hear maybe my thoughts or ideas on this?
That's good.
Just to see where they're at.
Yeah, and I think too another helpful question is like, why are you thinking that? Like, what made you draw that conclusion? You know, and so because sometimes I know for me, like I'll hear something or I'll read something and I'll be like, oh my goodness, this is what we need, you know, da 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 da. And he's like, well, wait, what made you think that way? And I'll be like, well, I heard this person. He's like, well, how do you know? You know, and so asking those questions that get me to go back to that or help me understand where that's coming from is another one that he and I will use. Like, help me understand where that's coming from because it's not making sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think those are some helpful.
So clarifying
tools.
questions.
Yeah, clarifying questions.
So you don't feel put on the defensive, but you
Right.
feel like, I like that phrase.
Yeah.
Like, help me understand.
Yeah.
Help me understand.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, we have like 20 minutes left, and so we want to make sure we get to some questions, if some questions are coming in.
I do have one, and I thought it was
Okay.
funny because I think you mentioned it a little bit. So what creative ideas do you have for us to celebrate Valentine's Day
Oh,
Goodness. In the midst of a pandemic.
in the midst of a pandemic?
I've been getting, actually, believe it or not, I never thought I would be getting this, but I am getting that one in the office these days. Like, what do we do? I was doing a video session last week. I'm like, what do I do? It was a husband asking me. I'm like, oh goodness, I don't know. No. I was looking at, being creative, making an intentional, back to my intentional investment ideas, like purposely going and doing something, grabbing some food together, getting out of the house if at all possible. If you go to a park or go to on a hike, some of the restaurants you can sit outside, but sometimes it's cold or the weather doesn't. But just like grabbing that food and going somewhere or doing something, but throwing in a little creativity, making an effort, I think is key. And what else was that question? Was it-
No, I think that was the question. Creative ideas. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of hit the.
It's so hard because we can't really go out of the area we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Like purposely getting in a car and going somewhere. Some people are going to the snow, and I think that staying outside is probably good.
yeah.
But being safe, being careful.
Yeah. That's good. Creativity.
I think another question is kind of how do we strengthen our marriage and make God the center of it, and what does it mean to be equally yoked?
I think it's maybe kind of what and I'm repeating myself here, but really being intentional to sit with it, praying together. Sometimes even when we don't feel like it.
Right.
I think the idea of if I'm miffed at my wife or if they're miffed at me, it's hard to pray together. So we need to work that through and looking at it and even praying through those rough spots.
Right.
And then making it purposeful. Not that we always have to have a devotional or a Bible study together, but just that we're praying, that we are of like mind, and looking at some scripture together, or talking about what are you reading, or what are you looking at, or what's God showing you right now in your life.
Right. I do like that as we do the Bible in a year, doing that as a church. I think that's been helpful, because even there's a lot of odd parts of the Bible, and it's like fun just to even discuss. What in the world is that about?
Yeah.
And there's something about faith and being curious about God together as well. What is God doing? And I think we're the intersection of faith and the cultural issues we have, whether it's presidential stuff or racial stuff. There's definitely like heavy subjects, but you're engaged with this other person, this spouse who you're so close with. And even if you disagree, that's another question. When people disagree vehemently about big topics, big issues, I mean, have you found that there are some things that are almost non-negotiable, and then other things that, we can be Republican and Democrat in the same house, no big deal, but have you found some things that are just
non-negotiables? It has been very interesting. I remember my grandparents, they both belonged to two different political parties, and it was always fun to hear them coming back and say, I killed your vote, I killed your vote. And then they would hug and love each other, and it was fine. But it was quite humorous. So sometimes, I don't know if we're able to do that as well anymore.
Why do you think that is?
Gosh, Ben. I think it is, there's so much anger. There's a lot more anger and rage and underpinnings in that, and that has to come from somewhere. And so that's unfortunate.
Do you think that comes from a more self-centered culture that we live in?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. There's more, and also just like I think a lot more. I think unfortunate thing that has come out of this period of time, we're going to be looking at human behavior. Social psychologists are going to be looking at human behavior from this pandemic.
Absolutely.
But I believe there's this argumentative culture that has been up, kind of roaring up. I think it's been there, but I think it really has showed its unique, ugly head.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the tentacles of that get into our relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know if it's a non-negotiable, but it's just the idea of, or deal breaker, but just looking at anger in a relationship and just how are we going to work through that anger?
Yeah.
For us guys, culturally, we've been raised, that's really, for a lot of boys, that's the only emotion we're allowed to show.
Right.
So it's like, what else is really behind that? What else is going on?
Right.
What other softer emotions? And it's okay for guys to feel that. But we come into these relationships having, our marital relationship where our spouse has a lot more emotions. They have a palette of God-given emotions, and us guys we put our card on the table, it's anger.
Yeah.
But what else is going on? I think it's so important sometimes for us to pull back and go, what's up with me right now? How did I go from 0 to 100 and I'm flaming hot mad right now?
Right.
And taking a break, first of all, and going, what's up with me?
Right.
And eventually coming back. But the first thing is, I think so many times we want to duke it out, or we want to talk it out, not physically duke it out, but talk it out.
Right.
And that's not in any way, shape, or form the best
Right.
practice. We need to take a break and then eventually come back.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people would not think that they were angry people.
Yeah.
Because it's, they're not yellers, or they're not going to be like, puffing up or being violent.
No, yeah.
But it comes out in a lot of different forms.
It oozes out.
When someone comes and sits in your office and you're like, that person's an angry person, but they wouldn't think they're angry, how do you normally see it manifest?
Sometimes it's complete withdrawal. It's pulling back and kind of like what we were talking about earlier, but like shutting down.
Right.
Or I'm going to take all my toys and go home. I'm going to not look. I'm not going to engage. I'm not, kind of what we were talking about earlier, is it your attempt or your bid for my attention, I'm not going to give it to you.
Right.
So it is, just like withdrawal, or I'm going to connect with other people and I'm going to show that you're not the most important person in my life, or I'm going to escape into my social media. I'm going to look at Facebook.
Right.
I'm going to give them all my world and what's going on, but I'm not going to show you anything.
So how do you help someone deal? I mean, this is part of, how do you deal with anger? How do you help someone look at their own anger or acknowledge their own anger, and how would they move forward?
I think in a lot of ways, anger has the ability to protect us. It protects the softer feelings.
Right.
And so the idea of like, what are those softer feelings? What really, it's a secondary emotion.
Right.
It's not the primary emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion that shows up. And
What's the primary?
so it would be, yeah, that's the question. Like it could be hurt, it could be frustration, it could be disappointment, it could be embarrassment, it could be a multitude of other things that are underneath that.
So anger is the response to a primary emotion that is not being dealt with
But
properly.
anger disguises itself as a primary emotion.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's like a football helmet. It protects the softer emotions.
Right.
That's the first one we see. And it actually repels people. Sometimes anger works for people and has. It's powerful.
Right.
It's controlling. But the idea of like, whoa, that's not helpful. Let's
Yeah.
look at that. And so it's the idea of, like what I said earlier, is like stopping and going, what's really up with me right now? How is it that I just blew up?
Right.
What is that all about?
Right.
And taking a break. And then for a lot of us, especially guys, we need to get it out physically. So it's like, let me take another lap around the block, or let me walk the dog right now, or let me get on my stationary bike for a minute or two,
Right.
and then coming back going, okay, I got it out. Let me talk to you. But the last thing is ultimately making that connection.
Yeah.
Where we have to really kind of focus on what else is going on.
Yeah. And can people navigate those emotions in their marriage? Let me rephrase this. When would someone want to come see a therapist? At what point would you advise people to come see you or a colleague?
Right. I think the idea is when all else fails,
Okay.
when things aren't working or we're up again, we kind of continue to bang our head up against a wall and it's not working, or we just feel pretty hopeless, helpless, and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's just becoming very, very difficult.
Right.
And then we're stuck.
Stuck.
We are stuck. Yeah.
I have one more. It's a little bit of a rapid fire, but I want to kind of hit the two spectrums. So for couples that aren't married yet, like how do we help set them up for success in marriage, like expectations, that kind of a thing. So I want to kind of hit on that, and then I think we need to hit on kind of those couples that are married for a long, long time, and they know that one of them is gonna leave this earth before the other,
Right.
and how do we help them prepare? Is there a way to prepare for that or not? So sorry, I know I gave you two ones, but kind of people starting out and then people near the finish line.
Okay. The premarital, I mean, you've done some premarital counseling, so I want to definitely hear what you have to see. I think looking at the fact that we come in with a lot of stuff as individuals into our marriage and being able to realistically look at that stuff. We look at, we come in with our own relational experiences. We come in with observations of our parents.
Right.
We come in with our own emotional, we were talking about anger and how anger is dealt with earlier. So we come in with just the idea of looking at emotions,
Right.
but looking at those expectations.
Right.
And so being realistic, I think some of my most challenging premarital counseling experiences, a lot of couples come in with stars in their eyes and they're not able to look at that stuff. Or they were like, we're thinking about the wedding and we're thinking about we want this, and that.
Right.
So it is, I want to hear what you have to say, but just the idea of being realistic, like there's work. Relationships are work.
Yeah.
And they're fun, but they're a lot of work.
A lot of work. Yeah, well, I'm not a counselor, but I do premarital counseling. It's through Prepare and Enrich,
Right.
which is it's a diagnostic tool. And what's cool is the tool itself, people take an inventory, and it breaks down into like 9 categories, I believe it is, but it's, money, finances, hobbies, leisure, family of origin, idealistic distortion is the rose-colored glasses, so you find people that the wedding's going to be perfect, and I want to be a princess, and he's going to be my prince. You get that.
Yeah.
But it's good because the inventory we give people, it'll show you a graph on where they have strengths, and then there are some growth areas. And I'll tend to walk with people. I'll give them a book or two, and I've done a lot of it because I'm a youth pastor for so long.
Right.
So, and I really love it. So I love doing the premarital counseling. But I don't try to do like therapy, childhood stuff, but it's generally about trying to get people to understand expectations, live in reality, set a budget, like talk realistically about your stuff and about your families and how and sharing like a similar idea for what marriage is going to be. So anybody wanting to get married, I would highly suggest doing premarital counseling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, highly. I did not do it. My wife and I did not do it. Part of it was pastor's kid and all that, and we were like, yeah, we should be good. But I think that's an over-spiritualization for sure about what marriage is as well. So just the concretes that are really healthy in premarital counseling. So.
Yeah. The older couple that's been doing it for all the other side of things, I don't know how we don't know the day or the hour. And I think so much of it is living, just enjoying each day that we've been given.
Right.
I mean, it's hard. Last week we were talking about hitting the fast forward button and getting overwhelmed, and just bringing on worries of tomorrow. But I think being wise, I think there's wisdom in that question. Being wise as to how do we make it work, but cherishing each day and just loving on your partner as if it were the last. Yeah. I don't know if there was anything else.
That's really good. Yeah, and I would assume too that if you are getting older, who knows when we're going to pass, but there is a level of getting life insurance or thinking through, like death is part of life as well.
Right.
As Christians, we have a different hope,
Absolutely.
no doubt. Yeah. But it's part of life. Yeah, well, one of the things we want to do is we want people to be intrigued by this. Hopefully this has been helpful. I'm sure it has been helpful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
But we definitely, if you are watching this live or if you're going to watch this later, we want people to be in groups. I actually had a friend who was a psychologist tell me that 90% of the issues people came to him for could be dealt with if they knew how to do friendships. So the importance of groups and good friendships, people that will pace with you, cannot be overstated. So we believe that transformation happens in groups. And so we want to get everybody in our church somehow connected in some type of group where they're known and where they can be known, and know others.
Absolutely. So you can let us know that you want to be in a group. We're going to try to get, we will have a marriage group starting up after this. And as from last week, we've got parenting groups. So if you're interested in being in a group, we're going to have online options only. So if you want to be online, we can do that. If you want to meet in person, we'll have some in-person options as well. So I encourage you, you can email us at hello@gracebibleag.com and let's say I want to be in a group with my spouse or whatever that looks like. So that's an option for you. And we really want you to be, I love that, be known and to get to know others and walk together, because marriage is hard, and having people that you can walk with and share with is really important.
Absolutely. And if all else fails, you go on the church website, look Betsy up, look me up, one of our pastors, anybody. If you said, we want to get in a group somehow, Betsy will help plug you in, and we'll try to get you connected. And if people are feeling stuck and they feel like they do need counseling, I know that you're pretty booked up, but would people be able to get a hold of you or contact you? Would you be able to refer people out? How would we do that?
I could refer people out. I could give you guys a name or two.
Got it.
That are
Great.
reputable Christians that are great therapists that I would want to go to.
Yeah. So again, contact us and just let us know, and Brent will give us some resources, and we'll try to get you connected to some counselors, therapists. And if you just want to sit down for, we don't even call them counseling sessions, but we try to do some counsel. Just try to be Christians that love people, and we'll sit with you, and we love to listen and try to be empathetic, and just try to start from there. So
we do have some resources that Brent recommends, books, and I'm not sure what all we have, but there's some books. So and we have some of those books available here at the church, so you can say, hey, I'm interested in that book, and we'll let you know if we have it, and you can borrow it from us. So that's an option.
Yeah, so many resources.
Yeah.
But again, connect with us. We love to connect you. Brent, thank you again for being here these past 2 weeks. It's
been an honor.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great.
I got one other thing I can tell you, and that is, if this has been an encouragement and a blessing to you, one, we'd love to know that. And two, if you would like us to do more of these, either another one on marriage or do a specific parenting one on toddler, like we need toddler help, like let us know. Send us an email at hello@gracebible.ag.com and say, I'd love to see a foundations on this topic.
Right.
And we will look into it and see if we can make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, wherever you are, you all have a fantastic night, and thank you for tuning in.
All right.
God bless you.
Thanks.
So lead me to your wisdom, be thou my vision, healing hope. You're the light within the dark, you're the love inside my heart, let it grow. River flow, when you shift my point of view, you are lifting me and guiding me through. You are moving me and making me new. You will lift my eyes with love. You will give me peace. You suspend the skies above, and you know everything. Lead me to your wisdom, be thou my vision.